What we do here is go back.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And this is Raja Raman. Welcome to .NET Training Academy. And today we are going to talk about entity framework, which means we are going to dive deeper into the code first model approach in entity framework. If you haven't watched the previous video, go back and check it out and the playlist, and because you don't understand what I'm doing right now, because in the previous video we have just kickstarted the code, which means the class first model. I hope many of you don't understand the internal details about what I'm doing in the previous video. So now I'm going to demonstrate the conceptual stuffs that we have done in the previous video by defining our conceptual code in a programming language. But now let me demonstrate the entity data model, because this will clear you how actually the entity frameworks works. And inside of that, let me make this one white. And entity data model. So I'm just going to increase the font size. So this is the thing about this container is the entity data model, and inside the entity data model there are three types of model. First thing that we have already done, which is which is a conceptual model. The first type is what we have already done, conceptual model. So I'm going to reduce the size of this. Okay, fine. Let's just change these colors. This is pretty good. The first thing is conceptual model, and the second one is going to be the mapping model, because it's the stuff which maps our conceptual code over here, just like we are describing our code in our object-oriented way. And this mapping model, let me copy and drag and paste it over here, and I just change this stuff to mapping model. The mapping model. And the third one is storage model. So what actually happens means the conceptual model, and these are the three types of model. And wait a minute, let me color this. So these are the three different types of model. These are the stuffs which is happening inside of the entity framework. And just wait a minute, let me reduce this stuff. So the conceptual model represents our C# code, the way that we are representing our data via properties. And the mapping model, what it do is it's going to map the database kind of stuffs, which means the schema definition language. It will map the map the database model and the object-oriented code, which means the C# code model. So that's the whole point. It will directly map every kind of data types, relationships, and all the heavy lifting will be done by the entity framework, and the mapping model maps all the stuffs, and the storage models is used to store all kinds of data. So let me make so just a minute, I'll clear everything. First thing is the conceptual model, which is also called as a conceptual schema definition layer, which is a real entity model. Against this one, we are going to write queries like all the queries. Mapping is just a layer which maps the conceptual model and the storage model. The logical, all the logical stuffs, the business logic that we are going to implement using our conceptual model will be mapped and generated into the storage model as SQL data code. So this is actually what the mapping does. Think about that. We go to some hotels, and the waiter come to us and say, what do you want? And the waiter make a list of something that we want, and we don't know how the cooking and how the inside of the black box, what's happening inside of the kitchen, but the waiter will map our queries into the storage model, and they'll bring back what we want. So that's one of my example that I can illustrate to make you clearer. So it's something like a schema definition language. If you're already familiar in Ado.NET, they use something like a schema definition language to define entity data model schema. So the data model primarily has three types. The first one is entity type, and the second is associate type, and third is a property. In conceptual model, wait a minute, I'll just going to write the stuff over here, and this one is the data store is the database, where we are going to store all the stuffs. And inside the schema definition language, we have three types, which is entity type, and the second one is associate type, and we'll talk about this just a minute. Let me wait. I just type all the stuffs right now. And property. Sorry, because I'm running three big softwares: Visual Studio, SQL Server, and Adobe Illustrator, so my machine hangs. So sorry for that inconvenience. So these are the three types which can be described in the data structure of schema definition language. Entity type. First, we are going to talk about the entity type. It is the fundamental building block to describe the structure of a data in the entity framework. In conceptual model, we are having a lot of entity types which are constructed from properties. For example, int, string, and string, something like decimal, datetime, blah blah blah. But these stuffs are mapped directly to the SQL Server's data types. So to make this more clearer, in conceptual model, the entity types are constructed from properties and described the structure of top-level concepts. For example, we are having a class called a company, and also we are having another class which has employees. So we are going to represent these as an entity. An entity represent something, a specific object such as a company or an employee, like that, and each entity must have a unique key, entity key, which means that the primary key that you have already familiar if you know about the SQL server, I mean SQL. If you don't know SQL, please go back and learn, because SQL, basics of C#, and those are all prerequisites. So please learn that and come back here. If you don't know those kind of stuff, it's going to be the stuffs that I'm talking right here will be viewed for you. So each entity must have a unique ID. So entity sets are logically grouped in an entity container. So that's the whole point. We can relate something, a company, entity, company, employee, and kind of stuffs in the associate types. So if we wanted to relate our entities, for example, a company have many employees, an employee may have many projects. So we are going to have a relationship like one company has many employees, which means has many relationship, and obviously employee has many projects, and vice versa, a project has many employees and employee has many projects, as well as projects has many employees. This is a many to many. There will be many projects in a company, and there will be many employees working in a company, and many employees working in many projects. That's what I come to say about many to many. So these kind of relationships can be done using the associate types, and the property is what we have already done in the previous video, just like representing the data sets of the data sets of integer and string, like name, my category kind of stuff. I need to make this more clear. Properties are defining the structure and the characteristics of each entity. To be more simpler, in SQL we have a table and we have fields. So those fields are represented here as a property. That's it. So I hope now you'll come to get a very clear understanding of what's happening in the property, and we are having this represent this one as a table. So just think about this is a table, and these are all fields. So what actually the entity framework do means it will map all these conceptual stuffs into the database to store data over here, just like this. So then here's the DB context. DB context takes care of which enables you to have a DB set. To make this more clear, it will allow the CLR, which means the common language runtime, to query the database, query from the database, and insert, update, delete objects, which is entities. So the DB context is an API provided by the entity framework, mostly targeted at simplifying your interaction with entity framework. It also reduces number of methods and property you need to access commonly used tasks. I think in previous versions of entity framework, these tasks were often written from a code like about 10 lines of code. The context class, which is this one, manages the entity objects during the runtime. To be frank, to be more clear, you need not to take care, or you need not to worry about the internal details of how the schema definition language or DML works, and because all the heavy liftings can be taken care by this stuff. Because DbContext is a recommended way to define a class, because the previous versions didn't have DbContext, but the DbContext nowadays, and this is a recommended way to store a database, which actually the DbContext exposes a DbSet, which is actually used to, if you wanted to know more about, represent the collection of all entities in a context, which means a product as a collection of entities. The DbSet stores, which means collect all the entities inside of the product, inside of the class. So that's the whole point, and I hope you guys clearly understand what's happening inside. Let me just make a quick overview of this program. This is class product. This is the conceptual model that we are implementing our business logic, and this is the product DbContext. DbContext is think about it is a way of querying, a way of interacting with the database, best way to interact with the database. So I'm just having a constructor in the product DbContext, and using the connection string we are connecting with this database, which named as entity learn. So DbSet is used to collect all the entities over here inside the class of product, and in the main program we are creating an instance of pro. Inside of the pro we are having two data, which is name of the product and the category of the product, and then we are creating a context for this product DbContext, which help us to interact with the database, which help us to add that data into the context and then store into the database. So in this line we are adding this data into the product pro context instance, and then we are saving the stuffs. So that's it for this video. This video entirely covers the concepts of what I have done in the previous video. In the next video, in the next module, we are going to talk about the CRUD, which means the create, read, update, delete stuff that we can do in using entity framework, and relationship, which is one-to-one relationship, many-to-many relationship, blah blah blah. Okay, that's it. Thanks, thank you very much for your patience, and if you haven't subscribed our channel, please go and subscribe, because it will help us to do more stuffs over here. And if you have any queries, please contact me via my email, which will be available in the description, or you can directly contact in the comment section. I'll be actively replying for all your queries. So that's it, and last but not least, this video is sponsored by iKing Soft Solutions. If you want any training, if you want some online training, if you want a training about the basics and core fundamental programming or latest technologies, whatever you want, you can go out into the ikingsoft-solutions.com. Inside the ikingsoft-solutions.com, you can contact with them, or you can mail them in the enquiry at ikingsoft-solutions. So that's it. Thanks for watching this video. Please make sure to subscribe. Bye.